how did you end up in Australia?
I've been very, very fortunate to actually travel all the world because of my work, and I've been to all continents. And last year, a year ago, it was during the end of COVID, I was invited to New Zealand to conduct New Zealand opera. And I had an appointment there, a contract for 3 months. So I visited New Zealand and I had a very, very successful run there, going all around New Zealand with New Zealand Opera. And I worked with the stage director Lindy Hume, who is a very, very famous Australian stage director, and I had an amazing work with her. And Lindy liked my work as I liked hers, and Lindy kind of really wrote to Australian opera houses. Soon after, Patrick Nolan, who is the CEO and artistic director of Opera Queensland, and Lindy Hume was the previous Opera Queensland artistic director and CEO. So Patrick, who actually followed up after Lindy, called me. We had a conversation. He got interested with everything that Lindy wrote to him. So we started talking, and he said that he would like to have me here. So we started talking about when that would be, and then this specific show I'm doing here came up, which involves a lot of female characters and female work. So that's why I ended up here, because I was invited by Opera Queensland.
So tell me about these two operas that you are conducting here in Brisbane.
Two operas I'm conducting here are extremely exciting and extremely passionate and extremely emotional. So the whole project, it's called, it's the human voice and the call. There are two operas that they are joined in many ways because of one phone call, which actually was, well, the thing that brought me to Opera Queensland, because I had one phone call with Patrick Nolan, and then he offered this job to me, which was fantastic. So what happens in these two operas, they're very, very different. One is French, the other is Australian. One is old, the other is a world premiere. But they're joined because of a female character in them going through a phone call that changed her life. So the first opera, it's called The Human Voice, La Voix Humaine in French, and it is based on a play by Jean Cocteau in the 20s, written, and then Poulenc, Francis Poulenc, the composer, wrote an opera in the 50s based on that play. So that play is very interesting because we have only one character, we have a woman. She receives one phone call where her lover is announcing to her that he will get married to someone else the day after. She's been his mistress for 5 years. She's been living totally like in their world, but suddenly he decides to go and marry someone else. So this is a very long phone call. It's a 45-minute long phone call in the opera, where we see that woman pretty much getting destroyed emotionally. We see everything that she goes through. She goes through anger, she goes through pain, she goes through this. And the most interesting part of it is that we never hear the other side of the line. We don't know what is being said, we just get her responses. So this leaves us a lot of room for our own interpretation of what might have been said to her, for actually the singer, because she's alone there 45 minutes with an orchestra, and she has to recreate both sides of the conversation, one in herself, in her brain, so she can respond vocally to that for the audience. It's a really, really strong text, very strong text. Extremely emotional in the orchestral part of it also. And the orchestral part highlights a lot of the emotional states that she's in. So you get anger from her, you get loud sounds from the opera, you get like her pain, you get this type of sound from the orchestra. It's very, very, it's like a description of her emotional world across everything that is happening and along with the words she's saying. And then we will go to the second opera, which is very, very different, joined again to the first part because of a phone call. So this was a very interesting concept. Ali Macgregor, the Australian very, very famous singer, heard once on a podcast called The Moth, a story that she found it very interesting, and she immediately wrote to the woman that said the story, told the story, and wrote to her and said to her that I want to turn this into an opera. She heard the story of a lady that she is not in a good state in her life. She was very well brought up, but then she took let's say, a wrong turn, and she went into, illegal drugs and substances and addiction and abuse and a lot of difficult things, and she also had a baby. So in this opera, which is different to the first one in the sense that it's more like talking about her past, because it's not in present time as the first one. So we see that woman who has gone through all that, talking about her life and getting to the point where she makes one phone call, because her mother had given her one phone number that she should call if she was in trouble. She makes one phone call, and that phone call changes her whole life. And that is a very positive outcome. Like, it really changed her life, because it is a true story. This woman became a university professor and she brought up her son beautifully. So the whole story there is based on the fact that you can have one act of kindness from someone, and that can really just change all your life. That opera is in English, and the libretto is written by Kate Miller-Heidke, and the music is written by Connor Ginetto, and Connor is a young Australian Brisbane-based composer, and he's very, very upcoming, and the sounds of this piece are very different to the first one. This one is really like heavy. It has a lot of elements of pop song in it, and musical a bit, and like some jazzy sounds, and also some hard pop and rock sounds, because we have like let's say we have a withdrawal scene in the center of the opera, and there he really, like, Connor has written music which really fits that thing, and it has electronics in the room, so it's really let's say a very modern and contemporary sound to what we normally think opera is.
How is it different working with a composer who's alive versus conducting to composers who have passed away?
So there are a lot of elements that are beautiful when you work with a composer that is alive. What's happening here is the fact that when you have a composer that is not with us anymore, of course the composer has notated on paper everything that the composer could and wanted, but again it lies onto the interpretation of the conductor. So the conductor there has to take the score, read everything through, learn everything through, analyze everything through, make decisions, and make the best possible decisions that will match the composer's wish as far as the conductor can understand the composer's wish. When you have a living composer, like Connor in this case, he's in the room with us from day one. So he's there, and we kind of recreate the piece together fully, because there are things that I found that would not work, and I told him, I said to him, that should do some, like you have to do something about that, and we talked together about the solutions. So it's a very, very alive process, a very creative process of like working with the composer in making the piece and bringing it for the first time out. No one has ever heard this piece before. We don't have a recording. We don't know, before we get to the orchestral sound like this past week that we got, we didn't know how it will sound like. Yes.
Zoe, it has been an absolute pleasure to meet you.
Tricia, it's been amazing to meet you.